Next we have the session which is called What Do You Do When You Finish Writing Those, I'm sorry. The speakers for the session are JayapriyaVasudevan, Anita Nair, Paul McVeigh, Ramm, Ekta Kumar and Meghna Pant in conversation with Preeti Gill.
Thank you. Good morning everybody. First session, the only session, really long. So I guess we have to keep them engaged. I think Lynn has already set out quite a lot in her keynote about things that you can do if you're a first-time young writer or not so young writer. So we'll come to that a bit later, but I'll introduce the panelists first, each one coming from a very different area. And what I thought we would do is to just ask each one to give their 2 bullet points or 1 main point about what they think is required after you finish writing your book. Anita Nair, novelist and poet, very successful, very published, and well awarded, Sahitya Academy, Crossword, etc. And I think also a very important voice here because she's the founder of the creative writing and mentorship program called Anita's Attic. So I think you'll have a lot to tell young writers here. Ekta Kumar is a writer, artist and columnist. She's also worked with Times Now and CNBC as a newscaster. Jack, he's not here.
Tracing.
Okay. Jayapriya, whom of course I've known for years and years, is also a literary agent, and I think she set up Jacaranda in 1997, so probably the first agency in India, and also the first bookstore cafe in Bangalore. She runs a regular writing course in Bangalore, and he has also been a festival director for the Times. Meghna Pant, author, journalist, recipient of various awards and honors, including the Franco Honor International Award and Commonwealth Short Story Prize, Ladli Media Award as well. And her new book, please do hold it up now, How to Get Published in India, is India's first guide with tips for first-time authors, and it also includes essays from well-known writers like Shobha Day and Jeffrey Archer. Yeah.
All the top guys. Yeah.
So in that, I think she has a release this afternoon. You have a book release of this book this afternoon.
Yes, so I'm launching this book. Shobha Day is launching it at 4:45 at Charbagh, and it's India's first self-help guide on how to write a book, how to publish a book, and then sell the book. And I've also got essays from top publishers, top agents, top writers across the world and in India. So if you're aspiring to get published, this will save you years of very, very hard work and struggle. All my advice and all my sincerity has gone into it.
And then we have Paul McVeigh, whose debut novel, The Good Son, won the McVeigh Literary Award and the Polari First Novel Award. And he's also the co-founder of the London Short Story Festival. So since so few people and publishers are always telling you that the short story doesn't work and nobody wants to buy it, but I think you're going to tell us that that's really not true. And so of course we've already been given the very large and very important question, what to do when you finish writing a book. So as I said, each one can tell us their 2 points, and what is the way forward once you've done that last revision, that last whatever look at your manuscript, what comes next? Are you going to become a social media sensation? Do you have to do many interviews before you even approach a publisher? Are you going to sell yourself, advertise yourself? Are you trying to pick up a local issue or a local topic that will anyway get you media attention and then you go to the publisher? So what are the things that actually catapult you into that space? And as somebody who's been in publishing for more than 25 years as a commissioning editor and as a rights director and now as an agent, I know a little bit about how this feels from both sides of the table, like when you're a publisher as well as when you're trying to pitch your book to a publisher. So I think I'm on their side. Let me just begin. So let's start with Anita first.
I think the first thing to do when you have finished a book is to probably get somebody who is not your family or your best friend to read it. Somebody who can tell you if the book actually works, rather than, family can be very supportive, but sometimes the supportiveness can go to a point where they're blinded by affection. So if you're going to be out there in the real world where your books might not, or your book might not be treated with the kindness that it probably deserves, it's best to create that protective sheath by first really knowing what the book is really about, if it's working. I remember that's a phrase that used to be used a lot in Indian publishing: this book doesn't work. And nobody can tell you why it doesn't work, but they just tell you it doesn't work. And it's a multitude of reasons more than anything else. Apart from that, I would also think that now in the current Indian publishing scene, there are quite a few agents, including Jayapriya, who sits here, and whose agency has represented some of my work as well. So Jayapriya and agents like her are there in India. And the thing is, not every agent is right for every writer. So you need to be able to hone in on the agent who's going to be able to represent your book well, because the agent has to believe in your book. In many ways, it's like, once you've had a baby and you need to find the right person to help you rear the child. It's not the parent, but it's probably like having a wonderful nurse who's objective, but at the same time efficient, and loves loves the baby that they are nurturing. So I think the agent is that person who's going to be able to find that, or fulfill that role in the life of your book. In India, we still do have publishers who accept unsolicited manuscripts, but internationally, I'm quite sure that many of them, though they do say they do, they don't. So it's probably ideal also to have an agent who would buffer the rejection. So every time you're rejected, you don't have to hear about it. You only hear the good news. And let me tell you that this is not the hard part of it, finding a publisher. The hard part is having to live with how the book is received. You might have put your heart and soul into a book, and for whatever reason, the book pages don't like it enough, or maybe there's a social media storm about how terrible the book is. It can work both ways, Either the media can take a mediocre book and turn it into a sensation, or the social media can discover it and turn it into this social media sensation. Readers come now from everywhere. They come from bookstores, they come from online spaces, and they look for a various number of platforms for them to know what is the book that they should be reading. And I think it's also very interesting that in this time and age, a lot of publishers too are scouting for talent in these spaces. But that doesn't mean it necessarily that you're going, just because you create a stir on social media, that you're going to find a publisher. All I'm just saying is that they are scouting. Everybody's scouting. Readers are scouting for new writers or new interesting books. Writers are scouting for somebody who's going to say something nice about their book. And publishers are scouting to see the potential talent. So in that sense, I think there are greater opportunities. And then of course there is a lot of self-publishing now, plus there are online platforms that publish, especially short fiction. So I think there are a lot of avenues open there now for somebody who has just written a book. It's probably not as limited as it was when I first started writing. And nevertheless, I would tell every writer here, the first thing you need to do is grow a thick armor, to get used to the idea of rejection, to get used to the idea of many things that are going to come your way if you're going to be a published author. There will be reviews where they can completely decimate you, and there will also be reviews where they praise you to high skies and you have this imposter syndrome. So that is where it begins and ends. So my only piece of, and just a couple of lines about, so I run this mentorship program, and why I run it it's a very small program. It's not like run through the year. It's not, I don't have a large number. But the reason I run it is one of the things I discovered as a writer, as a first-time writer, was how lonely it can get when you're writing. And I have wished that, there were people I could actually talk to about my writing. And I'm not talking about take the plot and the structure and the character and talk about it and have some kind of, a sense of companionship more than anything else. It's not that I need direction as much as companionship. And family sometimes or friends are not exactly the right people to do it because there has to be a certain objectivity. And so I set up this program to work with writers. It's not that I teach people to write. I don't believe I can do that. But what I can do is I can mentor somebody with a book where I can tell them what is working and what isn't working about the way the story is unfolding, based on my own experience as a writer and someone who's had to, go through the entire process of being published. So that's what I think is essential when you've written a book, to find somebody who is there to kind of hold your hand through the whole process.
Thanks, Anita. Lots of, I think, information over there, and primary being, of course, that you need to have an unbiased reader, an unbiased person to actually look at what you're writing. And at that point, I think we'll bring in Jayapriya, because you can talk a little bit about the role also of the literary agent and the kind of unbiased opinion, because you're almost going to be the first reader of this book that comes to you.
Good morning, and I want to start off by saying be encouraged. The market's really bad. It's as dire as it sounds, but books do sell and there are readers. So the first thing is I'd say be encouraged. Keep writing. So I'm going to move on from a few things that Anita said. So we're now building accessories. She talked about, getting a thick armor. I think the second thing you need as a writer is what I call a Zen hat. The minute you start writing your book, way before you finished it, you need to be calm and you need to be patient because it takes a long time. I don't believe that books get written in 1 day, in 2 days. I think they need to cook in your brain for a long time before you start writing it. So going on from that process, I would say take time to write your book. So as an agent, and I'll go into the business of agenting in 2 minutes, but as an agent, the number of first drafts I get, it's dismal and it's depressing because it doesn't work for either person. You're not showing me your best work, and I'm not feeling like I want to do anything with it because you just haven't nurtured it enough. You haven't spent enough time looking at it. So again, I'm going to go in parallel with what Anita said. So once you write a book, I think it's really important to get an unbiased reader. And in other countries, they have these reader groups. So writers get together and they mentor each other. And several years ago in London, I spoke to a group of writers. They call themselves the Beijing Pearls, because at one point they'd all lived in China. So there were these 20 women, and I think 18 of them have got published over the years. They've been reading their work, critiquing it very, very distantly, but with kindness. So I would say find a good peer group, and you can find them here. You can sit down here, talk to the person next to you, and find a peer group. But that is important. And then going into the craft, I would say take time to think about it, to write it, and then actually to not send away your first draft. I would say please leave it alone, leave it for a couple of months, leave it for 3 months. Go back, read it, do a second draft, do a third draft, and when you feel you're really happy, show it to a trusted reader and then send it out. Now, moving to the business. So I would say that when you're submitting a book, please look at websites. Everybody's smart enough to write, is smart enough to look at a website. Every single website, whether it's agency or publisher, they have very clear sort of guidelines on how to submit. And nobody's being precious when they say, we want it in this font and this size. They say it because the volume of work, which you heard our keynote speaker say, I think we get, and we're a small agency, we're 2 women running Jacaranda. We get 5 manuscripts a day minimum. So, the volume is huge, so if you send it in good form, if you send not the whole thing, send a query letter. Ask if we're ready to read it. And then, of course, the agent will turn around and say, I'm busy now, but you can send it to me in 3 months. And we're not being difficult. We really don't have time. And nobody in this business, it's just that there's nobody else to make that judgment but us. So we need time to read it, and if we've got a backlog, it's going to take that much longer. So I would say, send the query letter, proof your query letter. Please don't send it with spelling mistakes because we judge. It's our business to judge, And then after that, I would say send it in the format that the website looks for. Some people will say send me the synopsis and the whole manuscript. I would say synopsis, chapter breakdown. I want to know the ending. As an agent, I want to know how the book ends. It's very important to me. Some people may not. And then 3 chapters. That will give us enough of a sense of what will work. 50 pages, good average. But again, somebody like me, I judge from your email, I judge from the first page. And I think it's really important to get that right, to make that submission correctly. And then this is the hardest part. Please don't haunt us. Please don't. So I've had writers who've sent me a manuscript and 24 hours later, have you read it? And I want to say, I'm going to slap you now. Like, really, can't do this, can't do this. So I would say, like, in about a month, you can send a gentle reminder and send the same query letter back. Don't make us dive back into, older emails. Send the same mail back. Say, I mailed you last month. Here is my mail below. I'd love to know when I could send my manuscript. And it's really just a question of how many things we get, not an intent to hurt or dismiss any work. We need books to survive. Our business depends on your writing. So it's not like any agent says that I don't have time to read. It's just that there's a lot happening and we're all small businesses. If you look at the agents in this room, there are a few. We all run small businesses. So I'd say, send a query letter, send your manuscript when you ask for it, proof your manuscript, number your pages, put your practical things, put your name on every page, title of book on every page, because again, it's just the sheer volume will get mixed up. So that's the other thing. And then after you send your manuscript, no reminders for 3 months, please. None. No emails, no reminders. And even then, be civil. There's a guy who wrote to me last month. He said, if you don't respond in 72 hours, I'm going to go to another agent. I wrote to him and I said, go now. I'm done. So, if an agent like Anita said, it's a partnership, it's a huge relationship. We work really hard to make your book the best it can be, because once we take it on, is somebody else going to do the second half of it? Or do you want to? Of what we do after the book is submitted.
That is what we are all supposed to do.
All? So can I?
So you can also
Don't worry on the time, it's okay, go on.
Okay.
We're completely thrilled to listen to you, Jayapriya. Please go on.
So once we take a book on, so presuming that you've sent it to us in good form, presuming we absolutely love it, and the very first day when they had 3 publishers on this very stage, and another publisher said, what makes this business work? And it was the word love that was the common denominator. And so we need to love a book that we take on. We need to believe in it. There are no guarantees in this business. I could love it and it could take me 10 years to sell. I could love it and it could never sell. So, it's something that we take on with great faith. You give it to us in great faith. We respect that. So once, presuming we love the book, then we start working on a really, really detailed pitch document, which is extremely collaborative. It's got to be the writer and us on the same side. And you have to remember that your agent is your advocate. Your editor at a publishing house is your advocate. You have to be collaborative. You have to understand that you're on the same page, the same side, and the goal is to sell lots of copies of your book. I'm not going to use the word millions. I'd say thousands will be good. So, reality check there. So once we make the pitch and we start sending it out to publishers, that's your second round of waiting. And there's no point you asking me what's happening because I have no answers. I'm going to follow the same rule that I've given you, which is I'm going to leave the editor alone for a bit, because I know how much work an editor would have. I know how many manuscripts, and besides reading, they're also commissioning, they're also selling, they're also publishing. There's a lot that happens. So I think the important thing to do is, number one, write your book with care. Send it out in the form that people ask for, and people have different ways of looking at it. And the third thing is, be patient and wear that very tall Zen hat.
She said all the right stuff that you need to be noting down now if you're sending out manuscripts, whether it's to an agent or even to a publisher directly. And I would recommend sending it to an agent because it just makes things a little easier, and you at least ensure that, I think that's the first thing, that if it's a first-time writer, you need to have already kind of a relationship with the editors of different publishing houses, which I think agents have built up. And they also know who to send that particular book to, because in every big publishing house there are different editors looking at different genres. And you may not know, but the agent definitely will know who is the best person to send the book out to. So maybe we ask Paul now, because it's also, this is your first book. And maybe you can tell us how long it took you to write that book, how you made the pitch. And
hello, how are you today? You good? Yeah. Yes, a wee bit of energy now. Come on, I want you to impress me here. So I can talk about it from lots of different angles, because I was in your position maybe six years ago. I hadn't written for about 8 years. I had started teaching. I was a writer for theatre and for comedy in London, and then I sort of started doing a lot of teaching to supplement my writing, and then forgot I was a writer. And woke up one day and realised I hadn't written in a very long time, and I'd become a teacher. And I don't really know how that happened, but I needed to make that right. So I got back into writing again. The first thing I did was do a lot of reading. So read everything. Read what people are publishing now. Read what's going well. Read the classics. Read blogs. Read people talking about how they write. If you go to the Paris Review or the New Yorker, particularly the Paris Review, has interviews with Hemingway, Fitzgerald, right up to the modern day writers, and it's all free to access online. You're talking about the best writers that ever existed. You can read how they went about it. Get advice. You can get advice on publishing. You can get advice on everything online. It's all free for you to access, and I really recommend that you do that. Getting an agent, absolutely recommend you do that. I mean, some people go through and send their work directly to publishers. That's also possible. The good thing about having an agent is when they say, right, for example, my agent takes 15%. My agent sold my book to France, which I would not have been able to do. I could have sent it to a UK publisher, but how do I go about researching French publishing houses? How do I contact them? It's just something I don't want to get involved in. I don't want to be an administrator. I want to be a writer. So, I pay someone to do my administration, is the way I look at it, and also champion me and go to the places and say, hey, this guy's great. And, it's always better for someone else to say you're great than you to say it yourself. Then they sold it to Germany and Russia and Hungary, and we sold the stage rights to Universal Music, and I got much more than I got for my book, and all of these things that I would know nothing about. So those, when people say, oh, should I get an agent? I say yes. That's the first thing. I think one of the things I can tell you about from a different perspective as well is that I judge literary prizes. So last year I judged with Anita from the festival. We judged the Dylan Thomas Prize, £30,000 for a writer. I've judged the Edge Hill Short Story Prize last year, the Sean O'Phelan International Short Story Prize. And what I've learned from that is this. For the Sean O'Phelan Prize, I was sent 870 stories. Now, normally, you're only sent a shortlist. But I should tell you what happens when you receive 870 stories. You don't read them. What you do is you learn from the beginning whether this person's a good writer or not. And generally, it's the first page. If your first page isn't good, then don't read on. Because in a short story, it's only 7 or 8 pages long. If the first page isn't good, you're already 1/7 of your story isn't working. So the thing about that is a number of psychological things happen. It takes as much energy to turn the page onto page 2 as it does to pick the whole thing up and put it in the bin. And the thing is that you know at the end, you're going to be left with 30 great stories. You're going to whittle that down to 15 very good stories. You're going to whittle that down to 5 who any of them could win. So you're looking for reasons to stop reading. So you need to get your beginning right. You need to get a really good, strong beginning. And that's, if you're going to be sending anything out to agents, or that's what you're sending out, your beginning. And then they'll say, yes, please send me more. There's so much to say about this. I mean, in terms of rejection, you know, don't get disheartened, because everyone will tell you. My book was rejected, I think, maybe 15, 16 times. I told my agent not to tell me. I just said, only tell me when they say yes, please. Thank you very much. But I asked, of course, afterwards, just out of ego. But I was talking to, I talked to Lionel Shriver a year or so ago in an interview. And before we did talk about Kevin, which was this massive international success, there was a good few books they wouldn't publish. Because she had done well, she had published, I think, maybe 6, 7 books, and she just didn't get further and didn't become this international name, and they just dropped her, and they didn't take quite a few of her books. It even happens to writers who are already successful, so it's going to happen to you. And if you read, I think it wasn't the guy that won the it was the guy that won the Booker, I think it was 2 years ago, and he won the big prize in America as well. And he was saying, I think his book got rejected 80 times. 80 times, you know? Yeah, and this happens all the time, you know. So you just have to, and Emer McBride, whose book A Girl Is a Half-Formed Thing, which became this massive international success, you know, it was rejected, I think it was 60 times, you know. But it was such a singular story and so different that no one was brave enough to publish it. And when they did, it was a tiny UK independent publisher where she, you know, was given a packet of crisps and a bar of chocolate or something for the book, you know. And then it became this huge success, and then it was bought over by a bigger publisher. In terms of getting feedback, which has come up, which is really important, a couple of things that I did. One was I was a bit too sensitive for writing groups. I mean, I found that finding your tribe is what I think it really becomes about. You go to this room full of people, they don't know you. You have this little piece of your heart, you know, and you put it on the desk, and someone goes, "Oh, that's rubbish," and I don't even like it, and I don't like the person, and I go, "It's actually about me," and that's kind of like everything I ever hoped to write about. And I was just too sensitive for it, you know. But I gradually would come to things like this, and what I would do, I was so Machiavellian. I would pick the smartest person in the room. I'd listen to their questions, or if I went to something in a writer's workshop and they read out a little bit, I thought, that's really good. And afterwards I'd say, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And my recommendation is this: you don't say to someone, you know, can you help me? What you say is, can I help you? That's what I did. I said, look, I have a blog. Can I interview you about, because I think you're really great at this thing, can I interview you about this? And they said, oh, yeah. And even the teacher, can I interview you for my writing blog? You know, would it be good? I saw you, I read your book before I came, I think it's brilliant. And then well, okay, miss, what's your reach, you know? And then you can, then maybe after 16 emails and a coffee and an interview, you might say, you know what, I have these 2 pages. And that was the other thing I did when I met producers, BBC producers, and when I got my first commission from the BBC, it was the same thing. I met her when she was at an event like this, and I said, hello, can I buy you some cake? Everybody loves cake. And she said, I love cake. And I said, yeah, come on. And then, after about, I interviewed her about how to write for radio, right? And then the interview did really, really well online. She loved me, I loved her. I then said, could you read this half a page? I know you're really, really busy. It's very difficult to say, no, I won't read half a page. You can say, I can't read your book. You can say, I can't read your short story. But your half a page, it makes you sound really mean. You know, you can read that on the toilet or something, you know, like, you know, you could... when you're brushing your teeth, you know, you just sort of, you know. I do it when I'm ironing sometimes. Anyway, but I mean, you know, develop relationships is what I'm saying, and you know, you find your little tribe. The other hint I'll give you about feedback as well, rather than give someone your book and say, just comment on everything. Right? And then you get people saying, I don't like this book, and say, actually I love that bit, what are you commenting on that? What are you talking about? You're not even good at that anyway. I didn't even. So what I did was I found my tribe by saying, you know, when I was at these workshops, this person writes really good about describing building. I never describe anything. I'm just too busy talking and doing emotional stuff. And so I have a friend who I bought cake for, and she now, I send her my work, and this is what she does. I just look at description. And she goes through, and she'll go after about 2-3 pages, she'll put the legs, she'll go, Paul, where am I? Could you just describe a curtain? Or like a sofa? Or what does this room look like? And I go, okay. And there's a really nice brown sofa, and behind the window there's a vase. And she goes, oh, that's great, thanks. She just needs that, or she'll just say, can you just describe that wall he walked past? I think I really, you know, or, you know, and she helps me with that. Someone else helps me. I will say, you know, who's very good at dialogue, but you just go through and make sure that this person sounds the same the whole way through. Just that one thing. And it gives someone a real focus when they're reading, and also only ask them what they're good at. You know, I said, you're good at this, you do. I'm actually better at you at that, so I'm not going to tell you that. But what I'm going to do is just ask you for this one thing when you're reading. That really works. I have lots of things. I don't want to take up too much time, so you just poke me. Do you, yeah, go for it. Oh, it's good music. Okay, look, the thing about social media is, I mean, if you can do it naturally, and you enjoy it, and it's something you're good at, you should definitely do it. You know, if you hate it, don't do it, you know. People feel like, you know, oh, they tell me I have to do this. If you're rubbish at it, you know, it's better not to be rubbish. Okay? Just don't do it at all. But if you're good at it already, then, you know, this is something you're going to be preparing for, because even if you get your book contract, it's not going to be on the shelves for 2 years. I don't know if it's the same year. 1 year here? Okay, let's say if you're with a really big publisher and they've got a lot of books coming out or whatever, a year, you've got a year. What are you going to do? You know, you're going to start writing your next book, but you're also going to start building an audience online for this book that's coming out. And one way of doing that is taking the themes that your book is about and start looking at organizations that perhaps, say for example, it was about a child in the social system who's, you know, no one has got their parents or something. You know, you might follow agencies in UK that deal with that, and maybe repost articles that are interesting that link in and say, oh, you know, my book's coming out next year, here's something that I talk about here. And it's interesting, it's not just you going, look at me, I'm fabulous, but you're giving people information, and it's informing them about what you're doing. Also follow book bloggers, okay? They'll come and they'll review, and there's some really influential book bloggers in the UK, like really influential. They sit on prize committees now, and they go on television and introduce the booker and things like that. You know, these bloggers, they're really influential. So, you know, you follow them online, they make a review of something, and you say, wow, that's a great review, I want to buy that now. And say, oh yeah, well, my book's coming out next year. And they go, really? I'm going to look out for that. Absolutely happens. Happened to me. And they championed my book. You know, all because I was nice. You know, nice to them and read their work, showing interest. Practice reading your work out loud. And if you can, I don't know if you have the same system here. In the UK and Ireland, we have places you can go and read in front of an audience. You know, just
Like open mics.
Yeah, open mics, or you know, ones that curated and say, you know, and send your work into them.
Yeah.
Because if you can go and read your work really well,
Yeah.
people love it. They you know, this whole audiobook thing as well. It's the same thing. If you and be comfortable. Reading your work out and sitting on stage and talking to people, because if you can charm them, if you can read well, they'll buy your books and they'll remember you. You know, if you look really uncomfortable and nervous, they get nervous for you, and it's really embarrassing and awkward for everyone. Do you know what I mean? The first time I got on stage, I froze twice, and they actually played music, and I just looked at them. Scared? And it took me a while, and I really wish I had done that in my room with a hairbrush or something first, or went in smaller stages first and embarrassed myself instead of 200 people or something. So get practice in little rooms where it doesn't matter so much, so that when you come on stage, you're like, who is this person? They're really they're a complete person and an accomplished reader, and these things matter. I'm going to stop talking now. I've got lots to tell you, and maybe another time.
Outside of your And I like the fact of, also how writers grow. So grow in the sense of grow not only in their writing, but also maybe on social media or whatever. So when you first enter and then you're this shy or whatever, retiring type who doesn't want to let out too much of herself or himself, and then you suddenly realize that it has a lot of potential, and then you actually grow yourself. So I find that also, because I've watched a few writers who are with me grow in that way, and I find that quite fascinating, because they set out like these shy people and then suddenly they're all over the place, and maybe because they just come across as, like you said, confident and nice, generally good people, and they get called then to lots of festivals and so on. So it helps the book ultimately. The other thing I think which is really very important is the story, because yes, you can write cleverly as much as you like, but you need the story. And I think for me at least, the story is the thing, so it's the most important thing. So you cannot get away from the strength of your writing and the story and the compelling force of your own story. So let's now go to Meghna with the points that you've gathered in this book, and maybe a little bit about that and what these other bigger names have also pointed to as how you get your book published.
Thank you so much. So I'm not going to cover what my fellow panelists have, but I'll start with asking how many of you want to be aspiring writers? Not closeted. Let's make this a place of honesty for the next 5 minutes. How many of you want to be published writers? Thank you for the honesty. Was that tough? No? Okay. How many of you want to be best-selling authors? How many of you know how to format a manuscript? How many of you know what font to use in a manuscript? Much less, okay. How many of you know the margins that must be used in a page when you're writing? Very few, okay.
That's the agent's job, right?
Everybody doesn't have an agent as much. Okay. So I think as was mentioned, one of the things you have to get right is your submission package has to be on point. Now, how many of you know what goes into your submission package? Can anybody except Anuj here please rattle it off? Okay. I think this is where most writers or aspiring writers go wrong, right? We don't know what we have to send to the publisher in an email, right? Because there are no guidelines, there's no one holding a hand and helping us out. And I struggled, it took me almost a year to figure out how to even approach publishers, because I was from the get-go, I said I only want top publishers to publish my work, otherwise I will not publish. So I spent almost a year trying to figure out how to approach publishers, and it took me 6 months to write the synopsis of my book, to understand, to go to each publisher's website and figure out their submission guidelines, and to understand how to write a bio without a lot of writing credentials. All that has been put into, all that knowledge, all that struggle has been put into this book. So this book will help you through what to send to the publisher in your submission package. That's the first step, right? What do you think is the number of manuscripts that publishers get every single day, on average, a top publisher? Any numbers?
Publishers would get much more.
So, on an average, a top publisher will get between 40 to 50 manuscripts in their inbox every single day. How many of these do you think end up in the slush pile? That means they don't even bother to read it. They don't go past, as Paul had pointed out, even half a page.
90%.
90 to 95%. How do you make sure that your book, your love, your dreams don't end up in that slush pile? You send the right submission package, you complete your manuscript to its fullest potential. Okay, so now you've got a top publisher, congratulations. What do you think happens next? The editing process, the cover, the book title, the blurbs, it's a very, very tedious process. So, like Paul had also mentioned, it takes 2 years in some countries from the time you find a publisher to the time your book actually hits the bookstores. In India, it takes usually approximately around a year. Okay, so now you've got a publisher, congratulations, your book is done, your cover's looking fantastic, you're ready to become a bestseller. How many of you think that your book is going to make it into bookstores? There are only 2% of books that are published in India that actually make it to the bookstores. And there are approximately 90,000 books that come out every year in our country. That's what I think, around 200 plus books that are published every year in our country, most of them are academic. Out of these, only 2% make it to bookstores. Why would a bookstore owner select your book amongst all the others that come out? Now, this is a question I get asked very often by aspiring writers, that how much do I have to pay the publisher? How many of you all think that authors have to pay the publishers? And please be honest. Okay. This is a misnomer. I don't know where this idea came from. The publisher has to pay you. They have to give you something called an advance. And then after you sign a contract with them, they'll give you royalties. So for every book that you sell, you get around 7.5% to 15% in royalties.
But there are like books are publishers, people who want to write and they pay for publishing also.
No, that's in self-publishing. I'm talking about traditional publishing.
No, publishers, they pay money. They pay money also. I know publishers even in Jaipur, they receive money, and some people, like particularly in schools, colleges, and that type of books, they pay to the publisher.
That is a different. I'm talking about
You also have to
individual
pay to have
authors.
your book in a stack in the book from the bookstore.
Yeah, those are marketing techniques. I'll get to that later. I'm talking about publishers and authors right now. Yeah. So 2% of books make it into the bookstores. The publisher is going to give you an advance and royalties. Okay, and now, congratulations, your book is in bookstores. How many books do you think you'll end up selling? Okay, how many of you know what the number for a bestseller is? When an author says, I'm a best-selling author, how many books, how many copies do you think they've sold? We are a country of 1.3 billion people.
5,000.
10,000. How many books do you think actually end up selling 10,000 copies? Are all the books that are coming out? Sorry? 5%? 1%. In our country, only 1% of books that come out sell more than 10,000 copies. We are 1.3 billion people. How can we not even sell 10,000 copies? Shocking facts, right? 90% of books sell less than 2,000 copies. 90% of books that come out in India sell less than 2,000 copies. How will your book stand out? What are you going to do that's going to make the reader pick out your book? And by the way, you're not just competing with other authors. Don't think of fellow authors as your competitors. You are competing with a backlist of 5 million books that already exist out there in the world. You're competing with the 2 million books that come out in the world every single year. You're competing with Taylor Swift and WhatsApp and Netflix and Amazon Prime and the 10,000 music albums and the 75,000 movies that come out every year. Why will somebody pick up your book? Have you thought about all that?
You're depressing me. I kill myself. I'm giving up.
Are you including other languages or only English?
I'm talking about everything. So my very quick, sorry, I'll just finish and then I'll answer the questions. My simple advice is, because I'm telling you, I've learned this the hard way. I don't have a literature background. I studied economics and did an MBA in corporate finance and a business journalist. I had the urge to write, I had the passion to write, and I said I will only get published by top publishers. I will win awards, I will be a bestseller, and I have worked damn hard to get where I am today. And as a female writer, to all my female aspiring writers, it is 10 times harder. You're going to have to work 10 times harder than a man, because you will get lower advances than a man just because of your gender. You will get fewer awards than a man. The Sahitya Academy has been given to only 10% of women so far. It's a fact. It is a fact. Sahitya Academy awards have been given to only 10% of women. 90% go to men. No, it's a fact. I'm not making this up. It's a fact. You can check it. The Crossword Award has gone to twice as many men as women. The Hindu prize has gone to only one woman in its entire history. The DSC prize has gone to only 2 women. And I'm not making this up, you can find this out, it's all online. You're going to have to work 10 times harder as a woman. Best-selling female authors around the world like J.K. Rowling and E.L. James have adopted androgynous sounding names that make them sound like men. Why do you think that is? Because when you pick up a book saying J.K. Rowling and you don't know her gender, what do you think it's going to be? A man. You know what her real name is? Joanna Rowling. Very feminine, pretty name. Do you think she published under that? Why do you think she didn't publish under that?
Sorry.
Can I just finish my point and then you can interrupt me? And E.L. James, 50 Shades of Grey. When you see E.L. James, do you think it's a man or a woman?
That's a pseudonym. That's a pseudonym.
What do you think is the actual name? Erica Michelle, again, very pretty feminine name. She did not publish under that. So understand if you're a female writer, the odds are stacked against you and this is the reality. So you're going to have to work 10 times harder and market your book. So because nowadays in India and across the world, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. So please keep these small points in mind. I'm not trying to discourage you, I'm just giving you what the statistics are. You will have to work very hard. Self-publishing is an option that many people have explored. I think a lot of the writers now are self-publishing. It's a wonderful avenue. You have sources like Kobo, you have Amazon KDP, Smashwords, Crossword has come out with the right place where you can self-publish. But you face similar problems in self-publishing that you will in traditional publishing, which is you will have to market your book, right? So make sure, I know Paul was mentioning that, if you can't get social media right, don't do it. But honestly, I'm telling you, I'm being very candid here. I have struggled with social media because I was like, what place does a writer have to be on Twitter or, all of that? But I found that until and unless I build a brand on social media, nobody would buy my books, and this is the reality. So now I'm very active on social media. I come on TV panels. I'm pushing myself out there because today, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. And as an author, you are the brand of your book. Your book has now become a product. You have to sell it like a soap. And nobody will tell you all this. I'm being extremely honest and candid. Nobody will give you all this advice, and it's a fact. So all the authors that you have heard of today, the top selling authors, all of them are the best-selling authors because they have spent a lot of time, effort, and most of them have spent a lot of money on their marketing efforts. So today, India is reading the best-selling authors and not necessarily the best ones because these guys know how to market themselves. They're all businessmen or guys with MBAs or marketing degrees, and they worked very hard to market themselves. So whenever you start out your journey, from the time you start writing the book to the time you get published, please make sure that no matter what, you market yourself. So that's all the advice I have to give, and I'll take any questions.
Yeah, we'll do questions afterwards. We still have one more person. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bless everyone.
Thank you. You're getting the loudest claps, as you can see, so you didn't depress them. But also that I would certainly have many questions and quibbles here with stuff that you said. But yeah, we can also take that outside. But anyway, I do want to flag some of them. One of them being this thing of saying, I would like to go only to the best publisher. But who's the best publisher?
No, I said I want to go.
I know. No, that's what. So, I mean, the best publisher for your book, depending on the kind of book it is. So, I mean, yes, because yes, you will go to the best publisher, but then there may be only those 4 and 5 names that you can think of as the best publisher, who may not necessarily be the best for your book. And I come from a very small, very niche publisher, where I was working for the longest time with Kali for Women and then with Zuban, maybe not up there among the big names, but yes, with the most fantastic list and the kind of list that you would be proud to build, but it is a niche list. So you've got to know what is best for your book. Other than that, I would say also this thing about, I don't know about this female writer thing that you mentioned. Yeah, I agree with your statistics and you did say all that about the price. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But whether they get the highest advances, men get higher advances and all that, I don't know. I would think that it is the quality of the writing. But again, yeah, sure. Perception also.
I think from all the publishers.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just
I've done a lot of research for this book, so
yeah.
that's
So the other thing I would say is this whole thing about brand building. So you build up the writer as the brand. Again, many people might find that a little discomforting, but okay. And then this concept of what it makes the bestseller. So in different genres, different books would be counted as bestsellers. I mean, everything will not sell at 5,000 and 10,000 and 20,000. It's not going to, because it doesn't appeal to that mass. Just like a film. So there is a niche film which may appeal only to like very few people, but that doesn't say that the film's quality is not good or not praiseworthy or whatever. So I think all of these things have to be taken with, I mean, you've got to see that there are complexities within all of the stuff that, all this statistics that you do here. Anyway, all of that later, maybe outside of this room, if anybody wants to talk about it. And let's go to Ekta now.
Hi, good afternoon, namaste. I'm going to just begin with a confession. I'm sitting here on this panel and I have established authors with not one, but several books. We have people from the publishing world with years of experience and understanding. So I'm not sure with authors and consultants and agents, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I should really be on that side, on your side. I have no technical gyan to give, so I'm going to share a little bit about my journey and hope you get something out of it. When I was young, I think I spent my youth being very confused and wanting to do several things. I kind of confirmed and stuck to, in terms of career choices, I stuck to doing the conventional, I did my chartered accountancy, and then I did an MBA, and then I took up a job. And then I began to question myself and say, something's not right. And then I moved to media, and I spent a couple of years as a journalist, and somewhere it just didn't feel right. For me, I had to stop what I was doing and write. And that is what I did. It took a long time for me to write my first book, and when I was writing it, publishing was never a part of the consideration. At that time, my aim, my only goal, this all-consuming need was to create something, to make something, to tell a story. Although, when the whole thing began to come together towards the end, I started thinking and saying, I need this to go out, and I want someone else to read it, and I want to publish this. And then, of course, reality strikes. It's not easy. It was a very long and painful process for me to get my first agent. And I did, as someone mentioned, I did all of that, write a nice query letter and a synopsis, and I sent my manuscript, I said please, and I crossed my fingers and I waited, and I got no replies at all. I did it again. I went to festivals, met random people, and made conversations, sent emails. Again, I got no replies, but I kind of continued. And I also began to write to agents abroad. And somewhere, there was a lady called Heather Adams who kind of read and liked my work and believed in it, and she signed me on. She had impeccable credentials. She had 20 years as an editor and at Penguin as well. And but it didn't kind of work out. She moved to Canada, and but I'm glad she believed in me, because at some stage that was critical, because it kind of freed me up to continue to write. Getting a second agent was easier for me, I think, because I had one already. So I have now signed up with a lady called Jessica Bullard. She works for David Hines in London, and I'm hoping, again, I've just given it away and I'm continuing to write. But in all of this, I've celebrated many times, but the fact is, my book is not published yet. So which brings me to the whole, big question of rejection. I think as writers and as individuals, rejection is really a part of life, and we need to embrace it, right? The love of your life might reject you, you don't get the job you want, you don't get the promotion you want. I mean, there's so many of life's unfulfilled dreams that my book being rejected, I think, is an extension of how my life is. The question really is, what do I do after that? Do I stop, or do I continue to write? And I chose to continue to write. I hope you do too. I mean, which brings us to the whole point of what you do when you finish writing a book. So one thing you can do is wait and say, I'll wait for someone to pat my shoulder and say, well done, or I'll wait for an applause, I'll wait for a publisher. And the other thing to do is to continue doing what you love. And if you like to write, and if you like, there are days we just write lines and lines and lines, and there are some days where it's like magic, you catch something in the air and pin it down, and it makes it all worthwhile. So irrespective of, what the outcome is, I think it's important to continue what you're doing. Very often we tend to forget that writing is an art, it comes from the heart, and publishing is a business. And we have to remember that both are very different, and we should not allow one to kind of intersect or influence the other. Very often we judge our work based on, we judge what we do based on the outcome. It should not be so. If you love what you do, what do you write for? We write to kind of connect to people. We write to make them laugh, we write to make them cry, we write to scare them a little, to inspire them. We write somewhere to say something that hopefully sticks to somebody. And there are 1.3, like Meghna said, and 7 billion people in the world. You don't need someone to tell you this doesn't work or this is not good enough. I mean, what is good enough? There is no such thing as good and bad writing. You just have to make that connection. And for that, you need to continue doing what you love. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Ekta. Thank you for also bringing the entire discussion squarely on the writer, and the limelight is on the writer who's writing, because all of us are dependent on that. So I'm glad you brought that up. And this whole thing about being rejected and how to deal with it. So I think we can open it up for questions.
Yes.
Yeah? What, 5 minutes, 7 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Okay, is there any information about the segmentation of the market? I'm coming to the business side of it, from the MBA side of it. Because you might be writing for a particular kind of audience. You might be wrong question. Okay, as I said, you might be writing for a particular kind of audience. A very crass example would be writing for the people who are interested in politics. But I am talking about people who are in a certain profession, and you may want to write about how fictional writing about that profession, or about historical fiction. So, is there any segmentation in the market? Has anybody done that kind of an analysis? What is the segment of the market which is interested in historical fiction, interested in different types of since you have done some research, I don't know. You take it. Go for it. I don't know if the question is clear.
I'm not part of the panel.
It doesn't matter, we'd love to hear.
Anyway, I think that we are notorious for not having figures and segments, no?
Yeah.
The
No,
publishing.
no, it's not a question of having figures or not. It is a basic thing as an author what you're not doing, and what Meghna has also spoken about, Ekta has also spoken about. Do your homework. Every publisher has a certain kind of list, and every editor in that publishing house, there are about 8, 10, 15 editors in every publishing house, they all have specializations. So I think that is what is the due diligence on your part. Every publisher will publish everything that is good. All right?
Is there any data about it? For instance, let me
Yeah, Meghna has the data.
complete example.
Even God doesn't have that data, but
I am a
like your
retired
question.
bureaucrat,
Yeah.
and I would like to know, what kind of market is there for that kind of thing.
So,
Even God doesn't have that data, unfortunately, because our publishing industry is notoriously very deeply fragmented, and statistics are very difficult to come by. But I'll give you a small example. I have found that a lot of the best-selling authors I've studied their marketing strategies. They have created new readership bases for themselves. For example, what Chetan Bhagat did is that he targeted the tier 1, tier 2 towns and cities and created literally an entire database for himself. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And people like Savi Sharma, she's a very, very young romance author who's suddenly become one of the best-selling authors in India today. She also did the same thing. She went on social media and she created this concept of inspirational romance. Like inspired to be wooed and to be loved and all of that hope and loveliness. And she again targeted a very different market. So I think you can create your own target market. I don't know if you guys have anything more to add because you're from the business side of things.
I have a small suggestion. If you're looking at, trying to find out who else is writing what you're writing, just go on to Amazon and do books by bureaucrats, and you'll find what comes up. And it will tell you like what kind of books they're writing. Are they memoirs? Are they strategic notes? Or are they, experiences, etc. and so on. So you can do that with anything. Books by veterinarians, book by doctors, book by nurses, book by scientists.
Just one question at the back.
Sorry, excuse me, 1 second. Excuse me. I just want to say quickly, there's something in the UK, and I don't know if you have it here. It's called the Writers and Artists Yearbook. And you buy...
Yeah, you have it here.
Okay, you do have it. Oh, you have a version of it. You have it. And basically, it lists every agent, and it tells you exactly how to submit to them. So you don't have to guess. You just go and it'll do it by genre, children's agents, and it does it with publishers, and it'll tell you exactly what they want. So you don't make the mistake of sending something in, because most of the rejections for competitions, even exams, is that people haven't read that, and that's why it goes straight in the bin, because you haven't followed the rules.
Editorial keeps saying they must buy the new edition, not an older edition.
Thank you. No, we can't take more questions, but we can certainly talk outside. I think we have to get to the next section now.
Thank you so much. Fabulous.